Now, recipients of zakat. So this is, I think, yeah. So you got recipients of zakat. So condition related to giving and receiving zakat. Now, alhamdulillah, up until this stage, we've covered the conditions of zakat, what is zakat, the prerequisites of zakat, conditions of zakat, how to determine, calculate the nisab of zakat, um, zakatable asset, non-zakatable asset, and liabilities. How to calculate zakat on trading stock, loans, liabilities, mortgage, committee, etc. We talked about all of that now, alhamdulillah. Now we're going to talk about the receivers now, the receivers who are eligible to receive zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in Surah At-Tawbah, verily sadaqah is for the people, for the poor, destitute, agents, conciliators of the heart, slave debtors, and in the cause of Allah, and the travelers. So this is how we break it down. So this is a breakdown of all the verse of the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outlines 8 recipients. Now, who are they? The first one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, the one who doesn't own any zakatable asset. Okay? The one who doesn't own any zakatable asset or owns equal or less than the nisab that is preoccupied with their needs. So basically what you need to remember is this, that the one who doesn't own any zakatable assets equal or less to the nisab asset, okay? Or even if they do own zakatable asset, is way below the nisab. So for example, somebody's got cash, but let's say we determine that the zakatable asset is about 350 pounds, for example. But now this person's only got 200 pounds. So he's considered to be a faqir and is preoccupied with his own needs. Or they may have some money equal to the nisab, but they are preoccupied in their own needs. So let's say somebody has about, let's say 500 pounds, for example, 400 pounds, okay, right? But it's kind of preoccupied within their own need, for example, and they're going to use that within the year. Yes, they're going to use it within the year, immediately, basically. Has additional non-zakatable assets beyond the nisab, but within the needs, i.e. additional car for personal use, etc. So they're still considered to be poor. Because remember, that additional car, for example, personal use, that's not mal-e-nami. Mal-e-nami means productive wealth. So any item that does not produce, there's no productivity in it, it's not used for trading, it's not used for trading, or something that's within their own needs, an asset, which is not for trading, then that does not fall under mal-e-nami. That's mal-e-ghair-e-nami. That's not productive wealth. There's no zakat on such wealth. So even if a poor person, let's say, has 2 cars, for example, okay, 2 cars, for example, right, then that does not necessarily take them out of poverty per se, right? But obviously they can't beg though, right? The condition is that the condition, however, is that the ulama scholars say that there has to be within their own use. So even if they have 2 cars, for example, okay, right, 2 cars, but if they're making some kind of use of it, then they are still considered to be poor. However, if they have so much other wealth after that, whether it's even if it's mal-nami, for example, beyond the necessity, beyond the essentials, then you can't give. Then they're not eligible for zakat. So just remember, an additional car for personal use possesses adequate essentials only for sustainability. For instance, only 1 meal a day, only for 1 meal a day. So that's that. So that's the definition of poor. Then you have destitute, possesses nothing, beggar or dire desperation. Okay, dire desperation. So basically penniless. Amilin, agents, zakat collectors appointed by the Imam or Hakim. They represent the state who represents the poor. Yes, these are the people who represent the state, who represent the poor. It is the Islamic State who has appointed them as zakat collectors. For this one, they don't need to be poor. Even if they are rich, it is permissible for the Imam to assign a certain salary from the zakat money. Yes, that's according to all of the madhabs, more or less. Now, that's Amili. So, mu'allifat qulubum, conciliators of the heart. Affluent new Muslims who, after embracing the deen, were not yet firm in Islam. So, there's multiple interpretations amongst the ulama scholars about mu'allifat qulubuhum. Who are they? Affluent new Muslims who, after embracing the deen, were not yet firm in deen. So, one example of those people rich Muslims. They are the rich Muslims. They've just embraced Islam, but you give them zakat money so to entice them and to make them firm on Islam. So they're rich Muslims. They just newly become Muslims. Number 2, Another opinion is disbelievers to whom by giving zakat funds would attract them towards Islam. Yes. So for example, somebody is a non-Muslim, when you give him zakat so that it entices them to Islam. That's another explanation. And another one is those who are weak or have no faith, so to incline them towards Islam. The third interpretation is that understanding is that somebody has just become Muslim, but he's very poor. But you give them zakat so to make them stronger in deen. Yes, that's the third one. They're non-Muslims, they're poor, they've accepted Islam, they're Muslims now, they're still poor, but then you give them zakat, you prioritize them so that they can so to become firm in their deen. Now, if we were to take this interpretation, then you can't give zakat to them. Why? Is because they're Muslims and they're poor. As for the other two, right? As for the other two understanding, that's no longer applicable now. Yes, that's no longer applicable. And in fact, Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu during his Khilafat, he said that the rule of Mu'allafat al-Qulub no longer applies now because that was only limited to a particular condition and circumstance. So the Hanafi madhab understanding is that if we were to take the first two meaning, either affluent new Muslims or disbelievers, you give zakat to a disbeliever, so you become Muslim, or you give it to a new Muslim who's rich and give it to them so that they become much more firm in deen, then this is no longer applicable now because, like Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has increased and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has now strengthened Islam. So in the Hanafi madhab, this using a Sayyidina Umar Farooq radiallahu anhu's case, this is no longer applicable today. Then you have slaves, which obviously doesn't apply now. Gharimin, debtors, those who are in debt. So those whose overwhelming debt exceeds their normal assets less than the nisab rate. So for example, somebody has £3,000 saving. Somebody has £3,000, but they're in debt of £5,000. They're in debt of £5,000. And again, that £5,000 they need to pay within the year. They need to pay within the year, yes. Then in that case, then they don't need to pay zakat at all because the debt supersedes and overwhelms their own £3,000. Then you have fi sabilillah, the path of Allah, the mujahideen, hujjaj, and religious students, includes all of those individuals serving the cause of Allah. Now remember, this is referring to individuals, any individuals who are serving the cause of Allah. For example, somebody on Tabligh Jamaat, somebody on Hajj, for example, or he's a madrasa student, for example, they're all 10 fi sabilillah. It's not talking about the project itself, but it's talking about the individuals. So Ibn Sabil, referring to the traveler, a poor traveler whose wealth has diminished and has no access to it, and no access to his personal asset from home, even if it is more than the nisab rate. So a typical example is a person is a traveler and he's been robbed, for example. He's got a lot of money, but his money is at home and he's not able to access them, for example. So he's got nothing for himself now. He becomes poor. If somebody was to give zakat to him, zakat will be valid. So I hope this is clear to everyone. But the thing you have to be careful about is the poor one, is that this is where it gets the detail. What usual advice I give to the people is that, you see, when it comes to determining somebody who's poor, I'm not sure if I talk about this in the next slide. Okay. When it comes to discussing somebody who's poor, these are a few things to remember. Number one, look at their general condition. Look at the general condition state. So for example, sometimes people say that, okay, let's collect zakat money for back home people, right? And they say somebody's poor. Don't go by the word they're saying because they're poor. First, assess the situation. Number one, what's their average living standard? Is their living standard way below the average living standard of the community? So the community themselves can genuinely testify to the fact that that person is poor. That's number one. Number two, look at the assets. If they have additional furnitures, for example, or they have additional house, for example, the additional car and things like that, etc. Okay, right? They have these things, and it's not in use at all, then you don't give them zakat. Why? Is because what they're supposed to do is, the additional assets that they have, which is equal or beyond the nisab, they're supposed to sell that so to make ends meet. That's what they're supposed to do. Yes. If they have additional assets, but is within their need, then that, like for example, like an additional car for personal use, then obviously then they're still considered to be poor. So look at the assets that they have. Look at the earnings that they have. So the earning that they have, is it equal and less than the nisab, or is it more than the nisab? Number two. And number three is that And this is like a recommendation though. This is a recommendation that yeah, we're going to talk about that inshallah. Okay. And the third thing I would recommend is that preferably you go visit their situation yourself first. Yes, you go visit their situation yourself first, and if your heart genuinely testifies to the fact that they're poor, then you give them zakat. Then you give them zakat. So these are the few things to remember, because I know this is quite common here, so I mentioned this. So remember, keep in mind of the conditions of the poor person. Okay, right? They have less than the nisab, or they have equal to the nisab but is within their needs. They have no additional furnitures or anything beyond their essentials. If they do have beyond the essentials, then it's less than the nisab. It has to be less than nisab. Less than the nisab. For example, they have like two extra bikes, for example, but the value is less than the nisab, obviously, right? Then that doesn't matter at all. Or they have other additional assets, but they're still in need of that. That's still within the Hawaji Asliya. If they were to have additional assets beyond their needs, and it's equal or more to the nisab, then you can't give them zakat. What they're supposed to do is sell it off and then obviously make ends meet. So this is the general advice that I usually give to the people. Now, what are the conditions? We'll talk about shortly as well that who can receive zakat, who cannot receive zakat. But conditions for the fulfillment of zakat payable to the recipients. When you're paying zakat now, so this is the final stage now. Remember those 3 steps? The final stage is now you need to give zakat, isn't it? When you're giving zakat to the recipient, you need to ensure that they are fulfilling the conditions of zakat. You're fulfilling the necessary conditions. Number 1 is tamliq. Tamliq means transfer of complete ownership from the donor to the individual recipient, whether to himself or to his wakil. I talked about this before. The recipient then takes full ownership of the asset. It's integral that they take full ownership. Number 2 is niyyah. The niyyah to be made when giving zakat to the recipient or to his agent. Intention is valid until the recipient utilizes the asset. What this means is that one of the conditions you making the niyyah, okay, right? Now, how this works is that when you're making the intention to give zakat, you make the intention at that time that whether you're giving zakat money, or you can make the intention of sadaqah, or you can make any other intention that signifies ownership. So for example, if you're giving somebody, you know that this is your zakat money, right? And you give it to the poor person, but you tell him that this is a gift, but in the heart you make an intention of zakat, then that's sufficient. Okay, then that is sufficient. As long as the intention of the zakat is in the heart, you could use any other word so long as it signifies ownership. If, for example, you made the intention of gift, but you did not make the intention of zakat at that time, you just gave as a gift, and then you realize, subhanAllah, I'm supposed to make the intention of zakat, what happens? Scholars say that if that money is still in the recipient's hand and he has not used it yet, then you can change the intention that is my zakat money, then it's fulfilled. Once they've used it, and now you make the intention of zakat after that, then it's not fulfilled. Okay, so intention is valid until the recipient utilizes the asset. It's basically in his hand. Once he's used it, that's it, it's finished. It's like that wealth is used, is perished now. Okay, so keep these points in mind. There's also another masla about debt. Okay, now let me just explain this masla to you about debt. That what if, for example, you lent somebody money. Let's say Zaid lent Bakr money, for example. Okay, well, he gave him money at the time of intention of lending only. Yes. Now comes his zakat due date. Now Zaid knows that Bakr is so poor that there's no way that he's going to pay his money back. Can he make the intention now of qarz? Can he make the intention of zakat now? No, he can't. Because the intention that he gave at that time, when he gave it, was only debt. He didn't make the intention of zakat at that time. He can't make the intention of zakat now later on. Okay? He can't do that. So I hope that's clear. But there's another masla as well about this, that what if, for example, you're a rich person and a poor beggar comes to you and asks that if you can borrow money. You know deep down within that this person will not be able to give you the money. Yes, you know that he will not give you money. So you make the intention of zakat in the heart, but then you say, okay, here's money. Yes, but you make the intention of zakat and you know that you're not going to receive that money. In that case, your zakat is fulfilled. even now later on, if he was to give you that money back, that is now valid. Okay, but that's only provided that you knew that you had this thing, that you had this expectation that you're not going to receive that money back. Okay, because you know that he's so poor that there's no way that he's going to give it to you. Okay, then if he gives it to you, then it's fine, it's okay. The golden rule to remember about the niyyah is that the intention needs to be of zakat when you're giving the money, and that type of intention, whatever wording that used, it to signify complete ownership. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Number 3 is a Muslim. Obviously, you have to give zakat to a Muslim. Zakat could not be given to a non-Muslim and poor. However, nafil sadaqah can be given to them. Nafli sadaqah can be given to them, and even sadaqat al-fitr can also be given to them. I've written a whole detailed fatwa on this, is on the website. But poor, with the exception of amilin, all these recipients who do not possess assets in fixed or liquid form, equivalent or more than the nisab rate beyond the essentials. Okay, so I've already talked about that previously. Now, it's mentioned that Fatawa Hindiya mentions that as for the condition of giving, then the intention must couple with giving or separating the asset that which is necessary. So the intention, when does the intention apply? When you're giving the money. Or for example, when you're giving it to the agent. So once you've given it to the agent, that, or for example, to a charity organization, this is my zakat money, then that's intention sufficient. Even if the agent gives the money without him making the intention of zakat, but because you made the intention of giving zakat, when you gave it to the agent, when you gave it to the charity organization, that is sufficient now. Okay. Or for example, separating. So for example, if you have a safe, and now you have separated zakat money from the actual wealth. So just by the separation of the niyat at that time, that is sufficient. So when you give it to the poor person, even though you didn't make the intention after that, but because you already separated from before, and you made the intention then that intention is valid and sufficient. Now, eligible. The questions are, who are eligible for zakat? Eligible: siblings, brothers and sisters, relatives, students, religious students, friends, neighbors, nephews and nieces, for example, nephews and nieces, yeah, they can receive zakat. Giving zakat to them is permissible. Okay, so if somebody's got a religious student, if there's a religious student who's your relative, he's like a cousin or cousin, for example, or if it's a female, if it's a cousin sister, for example, if the aunt, uncle, or niece and nephew, brothers and sisters, you can give zakat to them. Those who are non-eligible, the descendants and ascendants and spouse. You cannot give zakat to your biological parents. You cannot give zakat to your biological children, and husband and wife cannot give zakat to each other. Yes, husband and wife cannot give zakat to each other. The Ahl Bayt, or the family of the Ja'far, Ali, Aqil, Abbas and Harith, right? So those were the Banu Hashims, you're not allowed to give zakat to them, although in the Hanafi madhab there is difference of opinions on this, but generally you don't give zakat to them. And finally, welfare projects, meaning, for example, somebody is asking for zakat money to fund their TV channel. Somebody asks for zakat money so they can build a house for somebody, for example, okay, right? Then that's not permissible then, because the concept of tamlik is not being fulfilled. It has to be given to the individual. So what kind of advice I usually give to people is that if there's a poor person and needs a house building, so the best thing to do is give zakat money into the hand of the poor person, and then let the poor person now use that money to build the house. Okay, that's the best way. In that way, you've fulfilled your farz, and now the poor person has used that money to build his zakat. But if, for example, somebody says that, okay, I'm going to use this money to build a house, for example, for him, then there's no milkiyat in that place. There's no milkiyat in that. Okay, so now if someone gives zakat to a person assuming that he was eligible, poor, but later discovered that he was non-eligible, i.e. rich, then your zakat is fulfilled. So if, for example, let's say you gave zakat to somebody who's poor, you thought that they were poor, and then after making your investigation, whatever, okay, then later on they turn out to become rich, then your zakat is fulfilled. Okay, so you go by at the what was considered to be what you thought was the hakikat at the time. Okay, let's go through this case study now. So case study is this, that a family member of yours is collecting zakat money for their poor relatives back home. A single mother with 2 children. So this is a typical scenario. So there's a family member of yours, they're collecting zakat money for the poor relatives, assuming that they're not your parents, they're not your children, and neither spouse, okay? But they're like cousins or relatives or distant cousins back home. A single mother with 2 children. She has no adequate income. However, she has a land to her name that is not being utilized nor generating any funds. Okay, she has a land to her name. She's not using it, nothing. It's just spare, just lying around there. The question is now, is she eligible for zakat or not, and why? And how can you verify a person's claim of their poverty? So what's your answer to this? Yeah, find out from yourself. Good. Okay, so the answer to the question is that, is she eligible for zakat or not, and why? Now, even though she's got no adequate income, the fact of the matter that she's got a huge land presumably is more than the nisab. The value is more than the nisab. She's got a whole huge land to her name and is not being utilized, not generating any funds. It suggests that this is farther on Hawaj al-Asliyah. This is something which is beyond her needs. And she's not, it's additional, it's surplus. She's not making use of it at all whatsoever. That's the thing that's preventing her from receiving zakat. What she must do instead is she has to sell this land, so then she can provide for herself. If, however, that's not sufficient, or the land that she owns is way below the nisab rate, or for example, she's utilizing it for her need, she's rented it out, for example, but the income that she's receiving is very less, way below the nisab level, for example, then she can receive zakat money. Okay, so remember this. So just by having land there itself not being utilized or generating any funds, and is equal or more to the nisab rate, presumably is more than nisab rate, then she cannot receive zakat. She's supposed to sell it and make money after that. If it's less than the nisab, or she's using it for her personal needs, and is what the revenue that she's receiving is way below the nisab rate, then she can receive zakat. How would you verify a person's claim to the poverty? As I just mentioned previously, that in terms of verifying a person's poverty, is those things to remember is look at the assets, for example, look at the condition, and measure the so for example, I'll answer that question shortly. Okay, so so for example, go by whatever the community say. So testification of the community of whether their living standard is way below the average level or not. So if it's average or above, then you have to be careful that you're giving them zakat. But otherwise, if it's way below the average living standard of the whole community, then yes, testimony, and best try to verify yourself. Okay. Now, somebody asked a question that, what if someone intends to live on the land but cannot because they do not have enough money to build on it? Well, it depends really, isn't it? Well, the principle here is that land being used for their basic needs or not? Okay, right? If the basic needs or not, okay, right? Or for example, let's say, right, okay, let's say there's a land there, but they intend to make it for their own use, for instance, okay, right? They make it for use. They're not generating any income any whatsoever. Then maybe, then yes, they can receive zakat, provided that they don't have nothing, they don't have anything else. That's the only thing that they have. So what you go by is that besides that land, do they have anything else? If they don't have anything else besides this land, and they want to build a house on this, but they don't have enough money, then that land now falls within their need. Okay, haja. If, however, they've already got a home, they've already got a land, they've got other things, right? Even though if it's bare minimum, then they have a land which they can do without, basically. Is beyond the essentials, then they won't receive zakat. So it just depends what the purpose is. What if mother is waiting for children to grow up so they can utilize it? Um, again, the thing is, look, go by the principle of Hawaji Asliya. What is Hawaji Asliya? Immediate use. If it's something for the future, but they're not using it yet, then it's then it's not Hawaji Asliya. If she's waiting for the children to grow up and then it's going to become part of the essential, then no. Then she can't receive zakat yet, okay? Hawaji Asliya means immediate use. Without it, you can go through extreme difficulty. So I hope that answers the question. Now, exercise. Identify whether the following receive zakat or not. So milk kinship parents, can they receive zakat? So milk kinship parents, can they receive zakat? Yes or no? Yes, yes, they can. They can receive it. Milk kinship parents can receive it. Why? Because that's not your biological parents. They're your mahram, but not your biological parents. Yes? So they can. So milk kinship parents, they can receive zakat. In-laws Can you give zakat to your in-laws? Yes, you can. Exactly. Islamic TV channels. Now, what I mean by Islamic TV channels is not those who are collecting zakat Islamic TV channels, but using zakat funds to zakat money to fund an Islamic TV channel. Yes, exactly. No, you can't. Well, if, for example, there's a TV channel, they're collecting donations for the poor people, then that's different altogether. Then you obviously can give them zakat, okay? But this is talking about specifically funding it. A poor individual who is able to work. A poor individual is able to work. Yes, you can. So even if he's able to work, but if he's still poor, because the fact that he fulfills the criteria of poverty, then you can give him zakat. A rich Islamic student, yes, if they're not sahib in nisab, that's correct. If the poor individual, yes. A rich Islamic student, can you give it to a rich Islamic student? So he's got a lot of wealth. No, you can't. Exactly. You cannot give zakat to him. A person possessing television value more than the nisab rate, yet earns below the nisab rate. He has a television, for example, okay? He has a huge television, a smart TV, for example, okay? Valuing more than the nisab rate. It's a nice smart TV, for example, okay? But yet his earning is below the nisab rate. Can you give him zakat now? No, you can't. Because TV is not considered to be part of the essentials. Ulama's, the general fatwa is that TVs and smart TVs and so on, they're not considered to be, they are not part of the basic essentials, that's why. So no, he can't receive it. Okay. So another exercise, identify whether in the following case zakat is fulfilled or not, and yes. Why? Paying zakat with the intention of a gift. Yeah, would you have to inform the receipt? So ask the question, would you have to inform them that this is zakat funds? If you're paying it to the poor person, don't say it is zakat. Just say it's hadiyah, for example, okay? Paying zakat with intention of a gift. Is that zakat fulfilled or not? So I've got zakat money, but I'm giving it. I made the intention of zakat in the heart, but I'm saying it to him is a gift. You can't, zakat is fulfilled. Paying zakat with the intention of a gift, it is fulfilled. Provided that you make an intention in the heart, it is zakat. But you're not saying it is zakat, but you're just telling me it's a gift. Yes? Then yes, it is fulfilled. Number two, paying your poor employee his remuneration with your zakat money. So you have a worker, right? You have a worker and you're paying him money for zakat. No. But there says that intention is a gift and not zakat. No. Intention is in the heart. If he makes intention of zakat in the heart, but he's giving it in the name of a gift, but the intention is zakat, then it's fulfilled. Yes? So paying your poor employee his remuneration with your zakat money. So you got somebody who's working, right? Working for you and you're paying him his salary, but you make intention of zakat. Can you do that? Exactly. No, you can't. Because what is zakat? Giving ownership. Here you're paying him in exchange of work. Yes? So no. To outright the borrower's debt with the intention of zakat. Zayd paid Bakr. Zayd at the time, he lent money to Bakr with the intention of qard only. Now he realized, you know what? You won't be able to pay me. I'll just outright it. I'll just forgive him with the intention of zakat. Can you do that? No, he can't. Exactly. No, he can't. Because at the time that we made the intention was only debt. Now he realized after a few months that he won't be able to pay me. You know what? I've forgiven you the debt and he makes the intention of zakat, then no. Because intention has to be met with giving. And that which signifies complete ownership. Your agent didn't intend for zakat when donating to the poor, but you did. You gave zakat money to a charity organization. You made the intention of zakat. They noted it as zakat. But when the person gave it, he didn't make the intention of zakat though. He just gave it as a charity to the poor person. Is your zakat fulfilled? Yes, it is. Yes, because your intentions is counted. To use zakat funds to purchase medicine or food to be given to the poor. Okay, yes, you can. Now, there's a few things here to remember. If you're basically, tamleek means individual ownership. Individual ownership. If you use the zakat money to purchase a medicine or food, and then you give it to the poor individual in their own hand, then that zakat is fulfilled. If, however, you purchased medicine, for example, or food with zakat money, and then that was then distributed collectively to all the poor people, then no, because there has to be individual ownership. Yes. Or for example, a common example is that people purchase medicine, for example, and they give it to the doctor. So the doctor, he takes control over the medicine and then he gives it to the poor. You can't, then in that case, then it won't be fulfilled. It has to be individual ownership. Sponsoring an orphan with your zakat money. Can you do that? So you register to orphan sponsorship, right? And every time they take about 25 or 30 pounds, deducting every month from your account for orphan sponsorship. Is that permissible? Yes, it is.